Sprinters on the main track Saturday, race number 7, the Belmont Sprint Championship. Only a field of 6. Post-time favorite was Limousine Liberal at odds of 9-5. This is a horse that has nice tactical speed, figured to be in just behind the likely pace setters, but whether it be Shaft of Light or Lewis Field or I Love Lulu, you name it, he figured to be just in behind there. Second choice was Whitmore, who normally does most of his running from the back of the pack. He really would appreciate some hot pace to run at, come with that one run. Hopefully it's good enough, gets an extra half furlong to work with coming out of the True North that was run on Belmont Stakes weekend. Well, instead, we basically had those two. They threw it down. It was a great stretch run, but they had basically the opposite running styles of one another. They flip-flopped. Either way, Limousine Liberal ended up getting the job done. Here's the stretch run of the Belmont Sprint Championship.
Turning for home together, I Love Lulu, Shaft of Light, Whitmore squeezing through at the fence. Oh, he really got bottled out there and bumped with Shaft of Light. In the meanwhile, I Love Lulu's in front. Whitmore's trying to come on with Limousine Liberal, and favorable outcome on the far outside. Lewis Field's in it too late. Final 16th here. Whitmore to the front. Limousine Liberal runs at him. It's down to these two. It's going to be Limousine Liberal.
Limousine Liberal gets the job done by a neck over Whitmore as the top two choices. One of them 9-5, the other one 2-1. Third place finisher I Love Lulu was a forwardly placed horse at odds of 10-1. And unfortunately, he had a couple of horses that were a little bit disappointing in here. Shaft of Light looked like he was a little bit overmatched, and he was actually the pace setter. He ended up finishing 6th at odds of 9-2. And then Chad Brown's entrant, Favorable Outcome, ends up running a disappointing 5th, basically trailed the field throughout at odds of 7-2. Let's talk about the winner a little bit more. Limousine Liberal. He's 9 of 23 lifetime. You see 19 times in the money from 23 lifetime starts, over $1.6 million. Owned by Catherine G. Ball, trained by Ben Colebrook, bred by Mike Ball and Catherine Ball in Kentucky. Ridden to victory by Jose Ortiz. You can see the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card by successful appeal out of an in excess merit named Gift of Gab. 99 Beyer speed figure, 125 time form U.S. rating for Limousine Liberal, winning the Belmont Sprint. Whitmore, 98 Beyer, 126 time form U.S. rating. The other interesting thing is, and again, for those of you that are unfamiliar with time form U.S., pace is factored in to the final overall rating. So you can have the normal raw figure based on just final time, but then you also can factor in the pace situation with the final rating, and that's ultimately what Timeform US does, and why I think it's a very valuable tool, using it to compare and contrast as opposed to other figures. So Whitmore earns a Beyer speed figure 1 point less than Limousine Liberal because he finishes second, but he actually earns a Timeform US rating 1 point higher than Limousine Liberal because he was closer to the pace than Limousine Liberal was. I Love Lulu, also co-highest as far as Timeform US ratings are concerned, with the 126, he earned a 95 Beyer speed figure. As far as the race itself was concerned, early on I thought it was a little bit peculiar that Limousine Liberal was as far back as he was, but when you see Timeform US had the quarter and the half, both color-coded red, meaning the pace was very, very fast, Jose Ortiz clearly made the correct call. Also found it a little bit peculiar that Whitmore was as close to that fast pace as he was because he's the kind of horse that appreciates coming from off of it with a fast pace to run at. Instead, he is in there third, just about a length and a half off of it. And, okay, you want to talk about the differences in two trips. Limousine Liberal eventually gets out there, goes on with a nice little bit of a run, but he ends up getting in tight after there's some bumping and banging down to the inside, which we'll touch on momentarily. Luckily for him, it seemed like it was minor enough where he was able to sort of right the ship and get back into the clear and go on with it. As far as Whitmore was concerned, Ricardo Santana, I don't want to sit here and bash the ride because I don't know that it was as egregious as a lot of people are making it out to be. I think it was just an instance where Whitmore was down there, the rail opened up, Shaft of Light floated out, and you had about a path. And when Ricardo tried to go through there, unfortunately, Shaft of Light drifted back down on the inside. They bounce off of each other like bumper cars. And then Whitmore eventually is able to angle out into the clear and come with his run. He goes back to his left lead toward the end of the race and just loses. Some people were making it out like it was a horrific ride from Santana. I don't think it was a terrible ride. I also don't think it was a great ride. I think it just is what it is. That hole was there. You always got to be a little bit leery about those horses drifting back in, especially a tired pace setter. And unfortunately, that's kind of what happened. Now, did it cost him the victory? Personally, I don't think so. But, it's one of those things. He also kind of caused the bumping and banging from the outside that unfortunately Limousine Liberal had to go through. So it is what it is. You had it's racing. Things happen. Horses bounce off of each other. I think the better horse won this day. I think Limousine Liberal, try saying that 5 times fast, was better than Whitmore. I am sure some people will look at it and say that's silly because Whitmore was closer to the fast pace. He had that issue down on the inside, X, Y, and Z. I look at it and say both horses had every opportunity to ultimately get the job done, and one did and one didn't. And it's also worth noting, Whitmore kind of had a little bit of a jump when it's all said and done. He was ahead of Limousine Liberal for a moment, and Limousine Liberal went and ran him down. To me, I don't want to take anything away from either one of them. I think they both ran great races. I think a lot of this had to do with this field and why they were able to overcome all that sort of stuff and still run 1-2. Can you do that against better horses? Can you get bounced around down on the inside and still be able to come with a run up at Saratoga against better horses? Unlikely. Can you take a horse all the way back that has a little bit of tactical speed and still, just because you think you're better than everyone else and then this day you prove to be better, can you take him back and try to make that run and still be able to do that against better horses? I'm not convinced of that. I think these two horses are two of the better sprinters that we have, but I don't think they're absolutely bulletproof like some people have made them out to be. Limousine Liberal, they're going to, it sounds like, point toward the 4-go, 7/8 of a mile. No reason not to. He's proven that that distance works for him very, very well. Interesting thing from Ben Colebrook, they've discussed the idea that perhaps long-term they consider the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile as opposed to the Breeders' Cup Sprint. And he said a lot of that will have to do with how that sprint division shapes up going forward. I personally don't love that idea because I don't think 8 furlongs is what he wants. We saw in that Met Mile most recently, prior to start to this, that, okay, the top two, I'm not holding it against him that he finished third in there, but at the end of that race, he was getting short. I think 7/8, unfortunately for them, that's really kind of an uncommon situation where, as far as Breeders' Cup time, you don't have a 7/8 mile race. I would run him at the 6 furlong distance and just hope that maybe you got a crazy pace, you can come with it or stay close enough to it. As far as Whitmore is concerned, they have an eye on the 4-go, but there's a scenario where they run him in the Vanderbilt. Now, the only concern there becomes you'd be wheeling him back in 3 weeks. Dave Grenning has all this reporting over on DRF.com. I think the 6 furlongs for Whitmore is better than the 7 furlongs. 7 is not impossible for him, but I think 6 is better. Very similarly what I was just saying with Limousine Liberal. I think 7 furlongs is best for him. 6 is not impossible, but I think 7 is ideal. Luckily, you're going to get that 4-go. And again, if you think that this horse Whitmore is okay to wheel back in 3 weeks, Ron Marquette has said how highly he thinks of the Vanderbilt, and that would be a dream of his. I think they should run him back if he's in good order. As far as the rest of the field is concerned, I don't really have much to say about I Love Lulu, Lewisfield, or Shaft of Light. I do have one thing to say about Favorable Outcome. I mentioned it when we talked about this race last week on the preview edition. Favorable Outcome, I think, is just one of those horses that against inferior company is made to look like a superstar. And then when the waters get deep, he can't swim. He had a beautiful setup in here from a pace standpoint, and perhaps there's something I'm unaware of as far as a physical issue, but I think he looks like that kind of horse right now that against middling sort of company, he can look like an absolute all-star. And then when he gets against really solid company, he doesn't cut the mustard. It's a little bit of a tough go of it. So Favorable Outcome to me, he's more of a high allowance sort of level horse as opposed to a true graded stakes caliber runner. But you know what, one thing is for certain. The top 2 runners, they're both very, very talented. Limousine Liberal and Whitmore. They both threw it down. They both had a little bit of adversity to overcome. They both ran very good races in the Belmont Sprint Championship, and it sounds like they could square off in the 4-go, or one could go in the Vanderbilt, and the other could go in the 4-go. Limousine Liberal, 99 buyer, 125 time form U.S. rating. Whitmore, 98 buyer, 126 time form U.S. rating in this year's Belmont Sprint.